Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Today was a productive Monday at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Tom, we talked to...
Tuesday.
Is it really?
According to the calendar, but
it is. Well,
can't trust those.
This is our fault for requesting Tuesdays to be the new Mondays because I'm still on the old Mondays. So yes, Tuesday. Thank you all for listening. We could restart it. We're only 27 seconds in, but no. So we talked to Ryan Day, talked to Greg Madison, Tony Alford, Justin Fields, Pete Werner, Brendan White, and KJ Hill. But before we get to that, the news broke this morning when Ironton, Ohio, four-star linebacker Reed Carrico committed to Ohio State. Released the news on Twitter at, 7:45 in the morning, 7:30.
An inconvenient hour.
Yes, very inconvenient for people who are just waking up. They need to do that after school, not before school if you're doing it during the season. So the Buckeyes picked up a huge 2021 commit, one of the best players in the state, the number one inside linebacker according to 24/7's own rankings from Ironton. Like I said, he's put up some ridiculous times.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 20-yard shuttle I think is under 4. And he's a fast guy. So he's also 6'3", 220-ish, still growing, still fast, a very good athlete, very similar, very necessary, as we learned today, for what he'll probably be asked to do at Ohio State.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Cade Stover, which I'm sure is partly my brain going white linebacker from small town Ohio, but also just, looking at his film, mm-hmm. his highlight reel, he plays a lot like Stover, where Stover was a running back and a safety for Mansfield High School, and Carrico is a running back and a linebacker for Ironton High School. And he is, when he runs, there's not. When I wrote the commitment piece this morning, I said there's not a lot of subtlety to him on offense. It is just, here's a big guy who is just going to dump truck some people, and he does not project as a running back at the college level. He's going to be playing on the defensive side of the ball, but there is some violence to his game, which is really pretty much exactly what you want to see in a linebacker.
Storm Klein and Ross Homan were also very good high school running backs. They were also very good high school linebackers, and that's what they did at Ohio State. So that's a good get for the Buckeyes. I was talking with somebody this weekend about, while we're talking recruiting in 2021, Najee Story, the defensive end from Solon, who is the number 6 player in Ohio, according to the 24/7 composite. I was getting some good reviews on him. Big, strong kid who the offense has to pretty much gear their scheme around him. And so he's another one to watch. And while we're talking about that, Corey Kiner, the running back, mm-hmm. who is 100% crystal balled to Ohio from Roger Bacon in Cincinnati, was at Ohio State this weekend, I believe.
He's crystal balled to Michigan, but he was at Ohio State this weekend. Yeah, we saw him at the game. Yeah, we saw him at the game on Saturday. And running back is a position that it's in some flux right now at Ohio State in the next couple classes. So, they have locked down the state right now. To have 4 of the top 5 kids in the state for 2021. Mm-hmm. These are kids who are just starting their junior year. 4 of the top 5 are already committed. The 5th one is Lorenzo Stiles Jr., who's a legacy. His dad was Lorenzo Stiles Sr., who was a linebacker in the early 90s in the John Cooper era. He's a wide receiver out of Pickerington. He's the 5th guy of that top 5. He's, that's a little bit more of a question, I guess, right now between them and Ohio State and Notre Dame. But you mentioned Story earlier. He's the 6th guy in the state. He's a defensive end. He's pretty much solidly projected to go to Ohio State. That is, it's 2021 is a very good year in the state of Ohio compared to some recent years. And Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni and that staff, they have done a great job locking those guys up early. Because then you have the core of a very solid class, and those guys can go out and start recruiting. You've got some real highly touted kids in that. Jack Sawyer is a top 5 kid in the nation by pretty much everyone's everyone's rankings. Ben Chrisman's another guy who's a 5-star or borderline 5-star offensive tackle. Those are guys who are going to be playing in those all-star games and who can go out and be ambassadors for you and help recruit for you and build that class themselves.
And you also have you already have your quarterback in Kyle McCord, so that those guys are always at the forefront in terms of recruiting and recruiting more players, and including their teammate like Marvin Harrison Jr. And so, yeah, good start for the 2021 class as we still wait for December and February for the 2020 class. So that is your recruiting. We haven't talked much recruiting.
There hasn't been much recruiting to talk. They've got the 2020 class basically locked down except for running back, and then 2021 is still kind of far in the future. That still sounds like flying cars territory to me. Like 2021.
What? So that's where things stand right now. Getting back to today, which is Tuesday, when we talked to the coaches, boy, there was a lot. If you want to read all of the updates or watch the videos, you can do that at theozone.net. It's there on the front page. There were some questions today about the usage of the middle of the field in the passing game. And Ryan Day had mentioned that that's all still in the game plan, but that also requires more man coverage than the Buckeyes have seen this year. They've seen a lot of zone, which, people are like, why aren't they doing what they did against Michigan? And that requires a defense who does something like Michigan, which is play a lot of man. And I think, as KJ Hill said, teams know better right now than to do that against them. And unless you are a man coverage team like Ohio State was last year or Michigan was, you probably want to keep with that zone a little bit if you're fearful of those crossing routes, those mesh routes over the middle. And so, they've been living a lot outside with their receivers and a lot of out routes, stop routes, comebacks, things of that nature. But I think that's okay. And I do want to see Justin Fields throw the ball over the middle and see how that is. And that will be the next question that he answers. But right now, they're taking what they want. They're taking what the defense is giving them, and they're moving the ball. So really, there's no need to start forcing stuff.
Right. Every defense is good at stopping something.
Yeah.
Except for the 2018 Ohio State defense.
But Tom, come on, we've moved on.
Have we?
No, we have not. We'll talk about that later.
I don't know if we have, but that's fine. Every defense has something that they can take away from an opposing offense. If it's press man, like that's going to take away. You're jamming guys at the line. You're going to kind of disrupt the throws downfield. But conversely, those same defenses, they'll have a weakness. If you're playing like a tight press man, Michigan was doing that last year, and they shut down a lot of people with that. But then when you play a team against like Ohio State, you can run. You're in that press man kind of coverage. But if the other team has fast wide receivers, they can hit you with those quick crossing routes and turn those small play. Turn a short pass into a very long gain. Same thing is true on the opposite. Zone defense is very good for not giving up big plays. Unless you really bust, you should not give up a bunch of 90-yard plays in zone defense. But there are ways to take advantage of that in other ways. You can there are seams in the zones. There are always pockets in zones. They can be somewhat predictable if you recognize the zone. So you can, there are man beaters plays. There are zone beater plays. Ohio State has seen zone, so mesh and their short crossing routes just don't work as well against that because there's a guy sitting there waiting for you in the middle of the field, and KJ Hill says they'll see me, they'll recognize me, they'll just bump me off my route. Like that's just the mesh concept, the short crossing concept doesn't work as well against zone. So you do something else. It's still there. It's still in the playbook. Ryan Day said, the playbook basically hasn't changed. It's just a function of what they've seen from opposing teams that has kind of determined what they're running and what they're not.
You talk about the playbook. One of the things that I found interesting is that I think some people think, and maybe we've even talked about this, with going back to a running quarterback, that the offense, the playbook looks more like the 2017 playbook as opposed to the 2018 playbook. But I believe it was Tony Alford who was like, no, the plays, this is more 2018 than 2017. It's just now you've got a quarterback running the 2018 offense that can run the ball, who can escape and create some things. So I think that makes things even more dangerous when you can do as much as you can in the passing game, and then you've also got Justin Fields who can keep things alive. And that's something that they worked on after the first game. The scramble drills weren't effective. The second game, you saw the one to Chris Olave for the big gain. There was also where the one sack that Justin Fields took, he was hoping to see Benjamin Victor or Austin Mack break open on that one. He just took a little too long. I think he was a little too confident that he had time, and he said today that he didn't really have the internal clock going once he busted out, got to escape the pocket. But he has to be able to see that guy coming. And the way this passing offense is going, you mesh it with what Justin Fields does, that helps J.K. Dobbins in the running game. And I'm interested to see what this thing looks like when they have to go 4 quarters, which they really haven't had to do yet. 2 quarters against Florida Atlantic, maybe 3 against Cincinnati. Do they need to go 4? We'll find out. We'll talk more about Cincinnati down the road. But they are incrementally getting better on offense, doing more things, adding things each time. And then also, something they've talked about today, offensively and defensively, just getting better at what you already do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a couple times that people asked questions that were basically like, you guys played, close to a perfect game on Saturday, and it was like very quickly shot down. Like, no, we were nowhere close to perfect. We've got to get a lot better in a lot of areas. And that's the mentality you have to have, because we talked after the Cincinnati game about the fact that they have seemed like, just as a team, they have maybe been a little bit satisfied at times in the last couple of years, and then that's when they step in the bear trap. And they got asked about it a whole bunch of different times today. A whole bunch of different people got asked, so how do you, what happened against Iowa and Purdue, and how do you keep it from happening again? And it didn't seem like anyone had like a real, no one came out and said, yeah, we got real overconfident and we lost our focus. And in some cases, they kind of explicitly said, no, it was not a focus issue. It was just a lack of execution. Which, I find it difficult to believe that Ohio State could execute so poorly that they could lose by 30 points to Iowa and Purdue. So, maybe there was something else that went into that, but, that's what they said today. So, I don't know if you will really know what, whether this team has it together in that kind of like psychological, mental way until they really get tested. Because you have, this was one of those things, like you used to see this with John Cooper teams where, take 1996, they come out and they just completely dominate people the first month of the season. And it wasn't just Rice and Pitt. Like, they just, they kicked Notre Dame's butt. They absolutely blew the doors off of a pretty highly ranked Penn State team towards the beginning of that season.
They would do it to Iowa.
Yeah. And then you get later in the season, and then all of a sudden, like, this is Indiana week, and when that 1996 team went to Indiana, they were playing a bad Indiana team, and they barely made it out because the Rose Bowl was on the line, and it was what Sir Alec Ferguson calls squeaky bum time, and it was, everything gets a little tighter, everyone gets a little nervous, everyone plays a little tight, and then all of a sudden, the stuff that has been coming easily all season stops coming easily. I don't know if it's this weekend at Indiana where that happens. It could be at Nebraska in a couple weeks when that happens. It could be home against Michigan State. It could be the trip to Northwestern. The Wisconsin game is all of a sudden looking like Wisconsin might be back to being all caps with Wisconsin. You've got some opportunities to see them put in one of those spots at some point in the coming weeks. And I'm real interested to see how this team responds, because it is a somewhat young team. In a lot of places, you don't have a lot of 4th and 5th year seniors in a lot of those key spots on this team. So, on defense, one of your leaders is Chase Young, 3rd-year player. J.K. Dobbins, 3rd-year player. Justin Fields, 2nd-year player. There's, and across the offensive line, Brandon Bowen's a veteran. Jonah Jackson's a veteran, but you've got a sophomore. You've got a redshirt sophomore. You've got a couple redshirt sophomores and a true junior. 3 redshirt sophomores. Thayer Munford's a junior. Okay, so yeah, you get 3 third-year players and a couple fifth-year players. That's not, they're veterans, but they're not Jonah Jackson, not to besmirch Jonah Jackson, but Jonah Jackson doesn't have a lot of big game experience in his repertoire, having played at Rutgers for the first 4 years of his career. So.
If anything, he has too much small game experience.
If the good news is, if Ohio State gets down, he will be guys. I know what this is. Right. It's okay.
This is perfectly fine. Don't worry, this happens. To go to that point, I was asking everybody today what their favorite aspect of this defense was, and Ryan Day said that they are scarred, basically, that they have been through rough times, and they have seen the darkness. And I think once, the thought being that you've seen it, you don't want to go back to that. You're doing things to avoid that now. You're happy where you are, and you're performing it at a much higher clip. And so while we don't know exactly how things are going to go when it gets tough with the offense or the defense, the fact that he likes the defense that has seen tough times and that has this chip on their shoulder, as he said, as everybody says, because it's a football thing. But that aspect of the defense being what he likes most, I think is important, and it's key. And so there has to be some aspect of a veteran ability to overcome, because you're going to have that, and coaches work on that constantly, and that's their number one fear, is just the unforeseen. That's why they're trying to see everything. So I maybe with that defense, maybe things won't be that way, or maybe they're able to overcome some toughness. But until we see it, just like when we asked Ryan Day before the first game, you're tackling well in camp. Mm-hmm. Are you going to, how's that going? And, he said, we'll see with the first game. And I guess you don't know how you're going to handle that adversity until you're dealing with it. And this will be their first opportunity this week. And, nothing that I've seen from this defense right now has me concerned. And I'm looking forward to, and like I said, we'll get to Indiana later on this week, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how this defense operates against a up-tempo spread attack, how well they tackle. Now they're tackling great. They're running to the ball. How is it going to be on Saturday when they may not have as much help because they're going to be spread a little bit thinner?
Yeah, and this has been a pretty well-constructed schedule for this defense, where Florida Atlantic, the first week, just the talent just wasn't there offensively. The second week, the talent was probably a little better from Cincinnati, but the scheme probably fit the Ohio State, especially in terms of how they run the ball, a lot of power running inside. That fits the Ohio State defense better than a team that's going to be, small guys trying to run sideline to sideline and spread you out and all that kind of stuff. This week, again, it's Indiana. They have a new quarterback. Schematically, Ryan Day said, you're basically going to see out of them what you've seen out of them in the past. So they're going to try and spread you out a little bit. They're going to run the ball. They're going to try and throw the ball. But you've got a first-time starting quarterback. So, again, this is probably not going to be a particularly stern test for this Ohio State defense. And then you've got Miami, and then you go to Nebraska, and Nebraska is probably, again, a little bit tougher. Things are getting probably progressively tougher for this Ohio State defense. But every week it seems like they keep talking about the fact that they really want to get better. They want to fix the things that need to be fixed. And assuming that that's really true, and that's not just kind of saying the right things when we're sitting in the room, that's what you need. You have to, because they said, and I don't remember exactly who it was because we talked to a lot of people today, but one of the people said they played well against Cincinnati, but they did not play well enough to get to where they want to be at the end of the year. Yeah. They played September well. September well will get you beat in November and January.
Well, what did Jim Tressel always say? September is for pretenders, November is for contenders. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not saying we saw that in Ann Arbor this past week, but that's a different story. But yeah, Tony Alford said we're not where we need to be. Pete Werner also said the defense isn't good enough yet to do what they want to do.
Yeah,
which I think is a neat way of saying there is still more to come, because and the way I see it is like they're talking in their meeting rooms, and Hafley and Madison are showing them like, this is what we want to do, but we can't yet because you're not there. We don't want to go straight to that. We'll get there, but we don't want to put too much on your plate. And why would you? When every time you talk to the defensive players, and we talk to them every week, and right now the same questions are getting asked, and it always goes back to why you're playing so well this year and the differences, and it's always because we just get to play. We're not bogged down with thinking. We can just let the athletes be athletes. And that's why Tom will never stop talking about 2018 because it is so baffling and it was such a wasted year for a defense. And I don't know that you should stop talking about it. People need to be punished. They need to be recognized. Possibly some rotten fruit thrown in their general direction. I don't want to say it's inexcusable because, Tom, it was inexcusable last year, and they've worked hard to rectify it this year.
Yeah, Brendan White, just to be clear, no one on this team is talking specifically about, hey, the scheme last year was a disaster, an absolute tire fire, and it completely killed the team. Like, no one is saying that.
No, not those specific words.
They are very careful not to say those words. And Greg Madison, says he doesn't want to talk about last year's team and all of that. I'm just going to read you a couple quotes from Brendan White, and if these are not completely verbatim, they are extremely close. Brendan White says, when the coaches allowed us to just play ball, the talent showed, as far as, what's the difference this year? He said, we had to think a lot during plays last year. I feel like we've had this conversation literally 30 times.
That's the name of the show now. It's the line
just,
the thinking too much conversation.
Yeah, simplified so we can play fast. The new podcast from theozone.net. But this is literally the story. And we keep getting asked, so why is it different like this year? Why is this year going to be different? Why does this year look different? Why do you think, why should we as Ohio State fans, why should you be optimistic about this year's Ohio State defense? And that's it. Because anyone you talk to, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, whether it's people who cover the team, the consensus everywhere is it was just too complicated last year. It was a defense that does not mean Greg Schiano is an idiot. It means Greg Schiano was probably running a defense that would work extremely well if you're an NFL head coach and you have a team that has nothing to do other than study football all day, every day, and can work 90 hours a week on football. That's great. That doesn't work at college when you have, they're technically limited to 20 hours a week and then probably, the non-countable hours of film room, whatever. Okay, it's at 40 hours. That doesn't get you to 90. And because they were playing so... what's a good way to say this? High risk, high reward, maybe. When you're playing press man, it's high risk, high reward because you're out there, and in a lot of cases you're out there and there's no one else out there behind you. And so you have one mistake, you have one time when a guy just doesn't make the right read on a play because he just hasn't had enough time to learn and to figure out all the different things he has to figure out. Then that turns into a long touchdown. This year, it's simplified. They're playing faster, but also you see people rallying to the ball more, and that's something that we heard a little bit about today as well. And you've seen that on the field. You've seen when there's Ryan Day said there was on the play where Sean Wade had the strip sack, they didn't recover the ball, but Ryan Day said there were like 5 or 6 guys right there, and he goes, I don't know how we didn't recover the ball, but they didn't recover the ball. But there were guys there. They are flying to the ball this year in a way you just didn't see. Because last year it was like someone would miss a tackle, and then there was no one there. This year, it seems like the cavalry is there much quicker and much more consistently. That is another thing that helps limit those big plays.
Yeah, I think that also helps when you're playing zone and you can see the ball and you're not spread running all over the place and not knowing exactly where the ball is to even rally to it. And that was, Pete Werner said he likes the fact that everybody's running to the ball now. And if one guy misses the tackle, there's 3 guys there to make sure that it doesn't go any further. And you've seen that time and time again. Brendan White said his favorite aspect of the defense is that they have their swagger now. And they can go out there and you don't have to, I don't know, I don't know. But when you're a bad defense and you're out on the field and bad things happen, it's impossible to play with confidence. When you're a good defense out there and you're making good things happen, confidence just comes naturally. And even though you're talking about a guy in Brendan White who's only played probably half as much as he thought he would, and Pete Werner is playing more than maybe he expected he would based on what he was saying today, but these guys are all happy. And when we talk to guys, Tuff Borland is playing half as much as he did last year, but he's smiling twice as much as he did a year ago. Mm-hmm. And that's everybody on the defensive line, or on the defense as a whole. Like, these guys aren't playing maybe as much as they thought or as much as they would like, and who does, but they're all, happy, and you can just see it in their eyes. They like what this defense is doing, and they may not be playing as much, but they're playing harder, they're making more plays, and you're also not going to play as much when you're putting more 3-and-outs out there, and mm-hmm. there are fewer opportunities. You look at Malik Harrison right now, who is one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. I think he's in the 30s in terms of tackles, because I think he has 10 on the season, maybe 12. And there's just not a lot of opportunities, and just in terms of plays. And then also there are other guys out there making plays. Defensive line is making plays. Chase Young, you've got safeties and other linebackers, Pete Werner. And really, it's going to be hard for guys to put up a whole bunch of numbers. Now, those numbers will go up in conference play. But, you could see another year where Malik Harrison and Jordan Fuller had 82 tackles last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know when you're going to see another 120, 130 tackles like Ryan Shazier around here.
Well, this is something that is kind of similar to something we've talked about with the wide receivers in the past, where if they're succeeding and they are, for the wide receivers, if they're catching passes, they're scoring touchdowns, they're winning games, then they are more than happy to be happy for each other, and for Terry McLaurin to say, no, put Johnny Dixon in and have him score a touchdown. I've already scored a touchdown today, and kind of spread the wealth around a little bit. On defense this year, they're successful. They've been successful. Everyone is happy. When you're successful, unless you have a real malcontent on the team, you're going to be happy even if you're playing a little less, because you want to be part of a successful defense. It's not fun to get torched like they did last year. And it is much easier if you're playing and you're stopping the other team, and then they put someone else in and you also stop the other team then you're happy for your teammate. It's very easy to be happy for your teammate when your teammate and you are all, everyone's succeeding together. Mm-hmm. If you take a player, swap them out, and the guy who goes in for him is giving up big plays, then you may see a little bit more, concern and a little less rah-rah camaraderie, and we're all in this together. But at least behind the scenes, we may not see it, but you may have it behind the scenes. If everyone's succeeding and everyone's doing their jobs, then there's not really much of an argument to be made that, hey, I should be playing ahead of this guy because he's terrible. Well, if everyone's playing well, then that's a very easy thing to get along with everyone else if everyone's playing well.
And Greg Madison talked a little bit about it as well, where if you have players who are bought into what you're doing, you can give them small roles or unique roles in packages that you may not trot out there, but that they take ownership of that, and they have to be ready to go, and they have to perform and show that they can handle those roles. But giving more guys those types of things where they'll throw, it's almost not quite to the level of a line change in hockey, mm-hmm. but you'll see 4 guys go in and they'll each have some unique things. It's not just going in to replace the guy you're replacing. You're also being asked to do maybe a little something different, or this package is the nickel package, this package is the short yardage, this package is this, and everybody has ownership of all of their own things, and then you go out there and execute it. You have to be ready to execute it, and it takes buying in. And whenever we talk to somebody right now, I think we've probably said this before, where last year we got answers from the linebackers that it was answers that what we thought they thought we would want to hear, that they would have to say, or it was mm-hmm. just very like you got them out of a book.
I don't want to say hostage video, but
yes, very much so.
Blink twice if you think the scheme is really bad this year.
And that's not what we've gotten from them this year. And I think the fact when they tell you what they like and they tell you what the reasons why things are better, and it's because of the changes that they've made, it tells you that they're being honest about it, and they're not just giving you football speak, and they're not just saying, well, we're a year older, and I don't want to really get into it, blah blah blah. They are getting into it, and they are giving answers, and that's good. Like I said, we talked to Justin Fields, who continues to be everything that Ohio State needs him to be. Feels more comfortable with the offense. I think maybe you mentioned after the game where he pulled Benjamin Victor aside after he was getting into a scrape with the defensive back, and Fields said, that we don't need that at this point. There's no sense in talking trash when you're up big. There's no need for it.
Which is such wonderful trash talk in and of itself. I mean, it's basically verbally pointing to the scoreboard.
Exactly.
Like, no, okay, well, you can say whatever you want,
yes, but you should have talked trash the first 2.5 quarters. You've wasted your time, and you wasted your opportunity. We talked to KJ Hill, who I thought it was interesting when it was mentioned that he made a lot of money over the middle last year, and that's not available right now. He said, well, I'll just have to make money somewhere else. That means something different in the Big Ten as opposed to the SEC, especially in this era of the transfer portal. That's another show. Anything else from the players or the coaches today? I thought it was interesting, getting Brendan White and Pete Werner in there, the two guys who we thought would not play together. We saw them together in the first game, not together in the second game. Kind of a yin and yang, both out there at interviews today. Really, it almost feels like Pete Werner has taken over the bullet, but that's not the way it is. It just depends on the opponent. It depends on the situation, as we talked about well before the season, that's what it was going to be dependent upon. And I think we'll start seeing Brendan White playing more this week. But Pete Werner, I mean, we say it, the coaches cannot speak highly enough of him. Jeff Hafley, after the game, was asked, everything you're doing with Pete Werner, and it was basically like, are you sure you should be doing that with Pete Werner? And Hafley's like, he wouldn't be out there if we didn't trust him,
right?
Yeah,
and Pete Werner today said it does feel a little bit weird to be like rotating back to being like we talked about this. He basically a safety in a cover one at times on Saturday, and he did play. He played in the defensive backfield when he was kind of younger in high school, like his freshman and sophomore years. I think he said he played in the secondary, but he's been a linebacker for long enough that kind of feels a little bit weird. But he and Brendan White both said they're kind of working together, where Pete Werner is explaining to Brendan White kind of the linebacker portion of the bullet position, and Brendan White is working with Pete Werner on the, hey, so you're a safety now, kind of, part of that defense, where every once in a while, like, nope, now you're not a linebacker, now you're a safety. And, again, this goes back to what we were just saying. When you are playing well, and both of them have been great so far. I mean, for the most part, there was not much out of Cincinnati at all on Saturday. And then against FAU, it was mostly when their tight end, when FAU's tight end was picking up a lot of plays, it was generally when Brendan White and Pete Werner were both off the field. So that position has done exactly, it seems like, what they were looking for it to do, whether it's Werner or White on the field, depending. And when everything's working well, it's real easy for to pull together kumbaya and let's work together and make this, they can complement each other and everything's working, and that makes it a very harmonious locker room, and no one's worried about playing time, no one's worried about their stats. It's just everything's working right now.
I was watching it on the Big Ten Network yesterday, and they were running the Big Ten Elite show of the 1996 Buckeyes, which is talks quite a bit about Joe Germain and Stan Jackson switching off, and they weren't necessarily as helpful doing it as Pete Werner and Brendan White have been. And I don't know. We'll see if that continues. I don't want to say you've got disaster coming.
Yeah, you definitely want to say that.
But credit to those guys. And as Craig Madison says, when you've got guys who are bought in, then you can get away with stuff like this, or you can create stuff like this. I shouldn't say get away with it. Anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
I think that covers pretty much everything, and then we'll do a much deeper dive on Indiana before we.
Yeah, because there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
There's some things we can get into, so we will save that for then, and you guys can look forward to that. Make sure to check out the content over at theozone.net. There's plenty of stuff there from today, and there'll be more coming from every day, really. And check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Got the Buckeye Sleepcast on Mondays and Fridays. You got Silver Bullets podcast on Tuesdays, and then we are, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We're like the happy days.
I think that was Sunday, Monday, happy days, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I'm not, frankly, prepared to do seven podcasts a day.
All right, well, that's the difference between you and me. I guess we'll just settle for 2 or 3 a week. Not a day, a week. 3 a week. That's it. That's my final offer, except on bye weeks. Or if you're one of those people who doesn't like the term bye week, open weeks. So that'll do it. We will talk to you later. Tom, goodbye.